All right, welcome to Vuex. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to set state from fetch. You should be able to dispatch actions from components. You should be able to describe the difference between Vue and Vuex. Just how these things all work together. Let's start briefly with this last one. How these things all kind of fit in. So Vuex is the blessed state management library for Vue. So this is, if we'll flash back a little bit to library, I'm going to frame this as unopinionated and opinionated. Over here, Rails, Ember. Over here, React. And NG is kind of like here. I'm going to put Vue dead middle. So this Vuex is a good example of that. Vue by itself is probably about as unopinionated as most other stuff. By itself, probably in this kind of range, much like Angular is mostly opinionated. What pushes it over to the opinionated side is there is no shortage of state management frameworks for React, because hey, I don't know how you want to manage your state. So you guys know Redux, but like Redux is not any official part of React. In fact, it has a pretty big hater crew. So there's another very popular tool called MobX that does the same thing. Some people just use the context API, tons of different ways to do that, and none of them are like signed off on by React folk. Vue is different. Vue will also let you manage your state however you want. If you would like to use a tool, there's an officially maintained one by the team that directly integrates into the app framework. So let's go ahead and bootstrap an application together. I've been working with Video Game Arcade today. I'm not inclined to stop. So Video Arcade it is. So we're going to Vue create Video Arcade. That's going to ask us what features we want. Important one for us here, Vuex. Just for the lols, I'm going to throw in a router and the CSS preprocessors also. And then enter through all the rest of this. Cool, you should do the same. All right, and we're in the Vue and Vuex business. Video Arcade server editor. So I can run npm run serve over here. Then over on 8081, I got a running Vue app. So I said that I wanted Vuex to be available on this. Let's see what that actually means. Because it didn't actually change all that much other than like installing the package. Let's see like where the magic happens on that. And it's in main.js. All we did was import store, and then when we make our new Vue instance, we set the store equal to that store. What's that store, you say? This thing is a new Vuex store. Pass in this object. That's what's getting exported out of this. But between that and main.js, that's what we got out of the box. Imported that instance, set store equal to it when we started the application. Also over here, set view.use Vuex. That's all the magic that we were given.
What are your thoughts on using modules instead of just having it all listed in the store?
That's the kind of thing that sounds like a great idea when your app is this big, and then when your app gets this big, you go, oh no, that was a terrible idea. No matter how small the application, I'd probably still use something like this. Also, like, this is a great way to organize a dumb store. And I don't even especially like this approach to client-side state management. The one that I like is a lot more like Active Record, but on the client side. So just like Active Record will manage all your database calls for you, I want one that also manages my fetch calls and shit for me. Figures out what URLs they have to be, figures out which requests I've already made and I already have cached responses to. I want something like that, but whatever. The world didn't agree with me. So now we're using these state trees. It's fine. All right. So that's how this gets plugged in to the framework. Let's talk about what it does. Generally speaking, if I have a component, I want this to be as dumb as humanly possible. And by dumb, I mean I pass things into it, and it renders those things. So pass in some props. I render it, and it shows up on my screen like an app. Every time. As soon as this is responsible for fetching data, doing any other kind of stateful thing, now what renders here, highly dependent on the state of this component. Did it fetch this? Did it fetch that? Suck. Meanwhile, if all I'm passing in is an array of Pokemon or whatever, this thing has way less state now. If it has nothing, it renders one thing. It has one thing, renders another. It has 100, renders another. But it's not also responsible for all this async horse shit. So one of the ways that I can do that is to have a view handle all that kind of stuff for me, all the asyncy parts, and then just pass those as props down to this. If you've done any React before, you may recognize this as containers and presentational components. Same kind of idea. Allows us to take all this goofy async stuff out of the components, keeps these a lot simpler. So we could do all of those directly in our view. Problem is, with a lot of this kind of state, it's not just one view that needs it. It could be all kinds of views. And that same thing with that state. Maybe that state gets used in this hierarchy, maybe it also gets used in a completely different hierarchy. It doesn't make sense to write out all that logic twice. So we get what we call state containers, or state trees, same thing. The idea of the state tree is that all of the state for my application, more or less, is in this object. One place. And if that is really all the state in the application, now I have a stateless application. If the state is one thing, the app is in one state. If this object is a different combination of things, the app is different. But that's the only thing driving the state of the app. That makes it easier to test. There's some error state that I need to check out. Cool. If I set the state equal to that object, I should be able to recreate that exact state of the application. That's pretty cool. If I want to rewind, cool. What was this object before? I can just roll back. It's like instant rewind. That's exactly how, when you do a bunch of actions and you're looking in the view helper, it records the entire state of the application. We couldn't do that until very recently. That is a really neat thing about this approach to state management. Can't do that with Ember data, that like active record-y thing that I like. It is way too complicated to handle that. But all the state goes in that object, not fucking bad. So many fewer errors that we can have in our application if all of our state's in exactly one place. So that's kind of how it fits in. Let's get hands-on. We are going to, let's do these other two. We're going to dispatch actions, and we're going to set state from fetch. So first, if I head over to app.view, I'll blow out all this stuff. I'm going to make H1, it says Pokemon. I'm going to make a UL that has a list of Pokemon. Like that. Now I'm going to the script here. Export default. All right, let's take a look at it now. Cool, I got that. Goal is to end with this, except we're going to be reading this out of Vuex, and we're going to dispatch a fetch from the component. Questions so far? Step one, I've got it hard-coded. I'm going to keep it hard-coded, but I'm going to make it actually come from the component. So I'm going to make a computed property called Pokemon, and it's going to return these guys. Like this. Now I'm going to v4 say mon in Pokemon. Unpluralizable pieces of shit. Mon.name. I can do key is mon.name also. And awesome. Still in business. That's all the kind of stuff that we've done so far. Regular loops and what have you. So now, next trick, I want to pull this out of application state. This is only owned by the component. The whole application needs access to whatever Pokemon I've loaded up. So I can go over to the store, go into state, and keep Pokemon as an array here. All right, so now those are in application state. And the way that I'm going to change this in this code is I'm going to return this $store.state.Pokemon. If I did this right, there they still are. Big takeaway from this. This $store, that's some magic. That's what this did, is it made this $store available in every component in the application. And this $store gives me access to all of this shit. I can dispatch actions, I can commit mutations, I can read state. Cool. Questions about this so far? What you got? All right. The red shit.
I was messing around with it earlier and it did this.
Cool.
It does the same thing like you don't.
Yep. That's right.
Yeah.
All right. So now make sure that you're. It's not just this $store. Yep. Cool. And then let me see your store. Okay, scroll's got to be. All right, go ahead and refresh. Okay, you crashed something. Let me see your Yep. Yep. Let's go back there. Let's watch it finish. Make sure this goes. All right. Back in business. All right. So then back to your template. What are you missing? Cool. All right. So we are reading Pokemon out of the store. Now, I'm still hard coding this stuff though. I want to get this from the Pokemon API. So I can do the fetch in an action, cannot do it in a mutation. I think there's a big semantic difference between these. There's a practical difference also. Mutations cannot have any async code. Has to be synchronous. Has to be synchronous. Actions can be synchronous or asynchronous. So if I'm doing a fetch, anything like that, it's an action. I take that a step further and say anything that's triggered from a component should be an action. You can commit mutations from components, don't. Only actions. So I'm going to make an action called fetch Pokemon. This is automatically going to get this object passed in. And we're going to destructure commit out of it. Commit is a function that allows us to call a mutation. Super common pattern. Now this is going to fetch pokeapi.co / v2 / Pokemon. I know I'm getting it wrong. Poke API. Is API. Cool. So I'm going to fetch a list of Pokemon. I'm going to parse the result. Take the resulting list of Pokemon. I want its results. Come on, man. It's 4 o'clock for everyone. All right, so I get this, and now I have this list of 20 Pokemon. I want all their names. So I'm going to map over their names. All right, so I should have an array of names. And then I'm going to commit that. So I'll make a commit. It's like set Pokemon. It has that array of names. So it always goes action to mutation to state, always in that order. Mutation is the thing that's allowed to change state. So in React, this would be the equivalent of like set state. So I'm going to say set Pokemon. And this also gets some magic stuff passed in. First thing is state. That's always what gets passed in first. And then the next thing is whatever you gave it. Sometimes that's called payload. Could be a variety of things, but it's whatever this is. So I'm going to give it this list of Pokemon. And the thing that I return from this should be whatever I want state to be now. So I'm going to say state.pokemon equals Pokemon.map. I have their name, and I want to turn that into name is name. Then I'm going to return state. I changed something on state, and then I returned the state object. So, I did that right. That's mad about something I did. Oh, so I'm not actually dispatching the action. There you go. But that's the chain. Setting state from a fetch, do whatever you want. It can be synchronous, asynchronous, doesn't matter. When you have the data that you need, call commit. Name of the commit, name of the mutation that you're going to do, whatever you want to mutate with. And then that mutation is going to describe how the state object should change. Yep.
Can I, is it possible to call an action inside another action? Okay.
Yes, it is. So if we wanted to do something like that.
But does it have to use a mutation inside an action?
No, it doesn't have to.
Okay.
I believe the thing that I need to pull in if I want to do an action from an action is also brag in dispatch.
Okay.
Then it works the same way as it does in a component.
Because the way I have my ops set up, I have to fetch it from Firebase and then pull it from that action.
I see. You probably, well, rather than having a separate action for that, you're probably better off, instead of using fetch directly, making a version of that like just kind of does it as part of it. So I just did an example somewhere where I made a function called get that takes in a URL and returns fetch URL dot then response and then response dot parse or JSON. So if you do something like that, now you don't have to also do like this noise. So if you also had something where like, I need an auth header, I need to always do this request first or something, you can wrap that in a function completely outside of Vuex without having to have two actions for it. They both work. But generally you want actions to be things that your components need to trigger.
Yeah.
All right. So that's that chain. Now I can do this in mounted, I can do it in created, doesn't quite matter, but I need somewhere in a view lifecycle hook to dispatch that action. So what I'll do, say this dot $store, there it is again, dispatch, and then the name of the thing that I want to dispatch. So this one was called fetch Pokemon. Fetch Pokemon. And there they are. That's Vuex in a nutshell, baby. One other thing I'll mention is that your data types in Vuex should basically never change. So if Pokemon is supposed to be an array, then make it an empty array. That works. If you try to make it null or something like this, like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Don't do it. Should be a string, should be an empty string. Should be an array, object, empty array, empty object. But keep the data types the same. Cool. We set state from fetch, we dispatch actions, and we talked about how Vue and Vuex are related. Another important point is that our component hierarchy now doesn't give a shit where any of this comes from. And if I decide to make all of this its own component, then double so. If I did touch source components Pokemon list.view, Pokemon list. I just yank all this over. Don't do any of this. And I just have props. And I say Pokemon. It should be past this and it should be an array. Then over here, import Pokemon list from at components Pokemon list. Make that available in the template. And then I can yank this whole thing out and say Pokemon list. Pokemon is Pokemon. And survey says they're all still there. That new component that I made doesn't care where these Pokemon came from. Could have hard-coded it, could have been from an API. That makes it so much more predictable and like easy to debug and all that kind of shit. Even this, my top level component, it knows that all of this comes from the store, but past that, I might have hard-coded it in there. All it knows is, go get me this data and make it available to me in this computed property. All of the actual logic for where this stuff comes from, how it gets transformed, all that kind of shit. That's the store's business. So if we relate this back to the model view controller metaphor, like here's our model. All the data stuff is completely separate from how it's consumed. Welcome to Vuex. What else you want to know?
So when you do it computed,
Mhm.
like
Sure. So computed is derived state. This is, so like maybe you notice that thing I got back, it's all lowercase. Well, that's not how I want it to look in my app. I'm not changing state. I'm not adding any Pokemon. I'm not taking any away, but I very well might want to decorate those. So maybe I do something that's like, make a computed property called capitalized Pokemon. And this returns this dot Pokemon, that computed property that's right above it, and maps through each of them and returns P to uppercase. That's what it is. Oh, then I have to actually use it. So now I just, I pass in capitalized Pokemon instead. Again, even though I'm using a totally different data source for this, that Pokemon list component doesn't know, doesn't care. To uppercase is not a function. I could have sworn that's what it was called. So to upper, JS to uppercase. This.
Does it need to be that name?
Ah! You got it. So, since we, shit. There they are. So I didn't change the data. If I look in my state, like if I pull up the view tools, and go over to Vuex, there's still lowercase in there. I still have those, but maybe I want to decorate them. Maybe I want to change them a little bit. Maybe I want to throw an isActive property on there. The state of the application has not changed, just my presentation of it. Now, to give you one more Vuex bonus, let's say that I had a couple places in the app that I want to use this. It's really not like this components issue. That's just one more way to present the data. The equivalent of a computed property in a store is called a getter. So how these work is we say getters, and I can take this whole capitalized Pokemon business and this takes in state as an argument. And so I can say state.pokemon.map and all the same kind of stuff. And now that's available everywhere in the application. So I can go over here and I can just say, yo, that's how I like my Pokemon, man. Store.getters, that capitalized Pokemon, and it gets mad at me. Oh, it's because it's not, it's just called Pokemon in the app now. We just say Pokemon, buddy. There they are. So any kind of derived state being, it's not actually separate state, it's a different presentation, a different combination, a different whatever of the exact same state. That's a getter. Canonical example of this, everybody uses. My full name is not new state. all it uses is existing state. So I make a full name getter that returns state.firstname and state.lastname. Full name is derived from first name and last name. And over here, make that available somehow, some way here. Kyle's name. And I can throw that right here. Cool. What else do you want to know?
When you're using Vuex,
Mhm.
is that like the way to do fetch calls?
Yes. All your fetch calls, with very few exceptions, should probably live in Vuex.
Yeah, and in the actions.
Not your mutations. Mutations have to be synchronous. Cool. What else?
For me and Carl, like what is a good definition of state?
Ooh, that's a great one. We're talking about state. Let's work on this together. What is state? It's a heavy one. What is state?
Basically a condition of something or some quality of it, an adjective.
Okay.
describing the thing.
A condition, a quality. We're in the neighborhood. Quality. What else? There's one particular characteristic that it has.
It's an object that can change.
Can change. Not necessarily an object, strings, anything. But that's the big part. Can change. Any variable that can be set, that can be changed by something else, that's state. So the reason these like state tree things became so popular is if I have a light switch in a house, two states, on, off, easy. Now, if I have two light switches, now how many, what kind of state do I have?
Have up to 4.
Up to 4. So we had 2 there, 4 there. So if we extrapolate this out, what's the rule?
Number of switches squared.
It's exponential.
Yeah.
The more different kinds of state that we have, this grows exponentially. And state is the problem. This is the biggest lesson of functional programming. All of your problems come from ooh, this works, but it only works when this one state is there. Or just as likely, the opposite. Why does this fucking break? It only breaks when this one particular state in the application is there. And as we keep adding and adding and adding and adding and adding this stuff, the number of combinations we have just becomes infinite. So this approach to state management, where it's all just in one object, now it's predictable. Now it's recordable. Even though it still has infinite combinations, imagine debugging where you go, cool, can you just send me your state? And you have the exact state of their application. If that state is being maintained in 4 billion different places, good luck.
If we have a program break and it says you want to send an error log, is that what you're sending? Is the state from the program?
Yep.
That helps them like recreate it.
Like not,
No.
it's not like literally this usually.
Sure.
What it often is anything that could be stateful. So let's say hey, do you want to send helpful debugging information to Microsoft or whatever? It's going to poop out any state that might be relevant. So sometimes that's, all right, you got this version of this CPU, you've got this graphics processor set to these values. All those options, those are different state. And so something that you might do if you're troubleshooting that is you go, is there any piece in here, or just as difficult, any combination of pieces that maybe we didn't account for that look weird or aren't set or something like that? But yeah, they're looking for weird state. Another thing that comes through those logs sometimes is stack traces. Those are the like big vomit that comes out when something breaks. So like if I get rid of that, but I'm using it somewhere. Undefined Coberly. Let's see. Come on, break something. Man, views being too helpful. Those big red things that have the long ass things in them. You can send those through those also, and they'll be able to trace the logic and see exactly where it broke. And then that, if they look at the state, that helps them kind of triangulate where something happened. Cool. What else you want to know? Cool. Go and be well.